What's up everybody? If you're enjoying this video, do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button. Almost 3 out of 4 viewers aren't subscribed, and I'd love to have you join the crew. And while you're at it, smash that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. I've been a cam girl for nearly 6 years now, and I have to say that it's a lot less risque than you'd think. I think most people expect me to be some sort of stereotype, because they act pretty surprised when they see that I'm just as normal as anyone else. Now, I've had to deal with a lot in these years. Rude cheapskates, boundary pushers, scam artists. The worst thing was something I saw in my own cam feed, and turned my life upside down for a while. I guess I'll start from around the time shit started happening. I moved out of state and away from my parents at 19. I'd already been camming for a few months, and my parents were pretty much entirely aware thanks to a particularly mouthy friend I thought I could trust. They said that they really didn't care how I made my money, but they'd rather I didn't do it under their roof. I don't know why this put me off so badly at the time. I find it very understandable now, but then I was extremely upset with them. I wanted to get as far away as possible, so I found another cam girl in the next state over who was taking roommates. About 3 years later, my mother found out that she had stage 4 breast cancer. It was far too advanced for her to be able to do much of anything about it. It had apparently hit her out of nowhere. She went from perfectly fine to dying in a very short amount of time. My family wasn't very good at keeping me updated on much of anything, so I didn't know until she barely had a month left. I did my best to fund my trip home, and I was thankful for some regular customers who were more than happy to tip a little extra in order to help me reach my goal. All I really needed was enough for bus tickets there and back, and for food and bills after coming back. I'd be staying in my mother's apartment. My parents divorced while I was gone and she had moved out on her own, something I wasn't told until months later, until she had passed, and the funeral had been all said and done. She died within only a week of being there. My sister told me that she must have held on long enough to spend some time with me, but at the time I felt it was more that she died earlier than expected because she couldn't wait to get away from me. After the funeral, and dealing with the side-eyeing of distant relatives who knew nothing about me but somehow had gotten word of my terrible career choice, I ran into a problem. I had run out of money early due to a bill charging to my bank account that I'd forgotten about. I'd already bought my ticket home for the beginning of the month, and trading it in for a closer time wasn't going to be affordable. I really had no choice but to stay at my mother's for the rest of the month. I could live off of what little food she had around, but I'd have to cam in order to make money for bills when I got home. First 2 nights were mostly a bust. A few tippers and confused regulars, wanting to tip but not having money for tokens since they were under the impression that I'd be out all month. On the 3rd night, I was having an amazing show. I'd almost reached my last tip goal for the evening and was just laying on my tummy in front of the camera, rolling around on the floor and putting on the best show I could. It was dark, and I'd already had a few viewers comment on how creepy the darkened hallway behind me looked, making jokes about how crazy it would be to see a ghost behind me. Then, the chat room fell silent before absolutely flooding with people asking who else was in the apartment, pointing out that there was someone behind me. From my view of my cam feed, I didn't see anyone, so I automatically assumed that they were all pulling my leg in order to mess with me. I lost my patience with it pretty quickly and logged off, just 100 tokens off of my nightly goal. The next night, I was getting ready for cam when one of my regulars, who I'd had problems with in the past, specifically regarding capping my shows without prior permission, sent me a DM on Twitter. The cap link has since been taken down, but the video is still etched into my memory. It was from my feed from the night before. I was laying on my stomach, talking about how odd it was that the chat had suddenly gotten so quiet. The hallway was maybe 8 or 10 feet behind me. A few seconds before the chat went nuts, something just poofed into existence at the mouth of the hallway. It had the shape of a man but no features. It flickered in and out of existence at a rate almost unnoticeable unless you were really looking. It stayed there, motionless besides the flickering, all the way until the feed ended. I spent a moment questioning everything, trying to be logical about it. Had I left the door unlocked? Could someone have gotten inside? I shook so badly that I made myself sick. Eventually, I found a way to convince myself that it hadn't happened by telling myself that the capper had edited the video. He had spoken to all of my regulars the day before after my show had failed, convinced them to play this practical joke on me. I calmed myself down, but not enough to get any sleep that night. The next night, I readied myself for Tam. Logged on in a different spot, just to avoid anyone else from trying to play tricks on me. Flat background, no way anyone could cap and edit something on there without it looking unrealistic. I got about an hour into my show, almost half of my usual viewers completely absent, when everyone began complaining that my audio was going in and out. I checked it on my end. Went through all my settings, no issue in sight. Waited to see if it would let up, but I was booted off cam before I could even ask my viewers if it had been fixed. Support emailed me, said that several members had reported a male presence in the room. The site I work for has a strict policy against it. It didn't take long for more people to begin tweeting me, telling me that they'd heard whispering into my mic, which was built into my webcam. I received a temporary suspension of my account for the rest of the month. I didn't know how I was going to explain to my roommates that I'd be short on rent, but there was nothing I could do. As the days went on, I felt increasingly uncomfortable in the apartment. I had extreme night terrors that I cannot remember to this day. My sister came and visited a few times, but she seemed really uncomfortable and would suggest that we go out and do something somewhere else instead. I didn't mind. I didn't want to be there either. After I took my bus home, I had to sell several of my belongings in order to make rent, but I wasn't worried. I'm very lucky to have understanding roommates that I still live with today. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end of what I dealt with. It was about a week after I settled in when a customer sent in a paid request for a private Skype show. I was using the same webcam, but a desktop computer rather than a laptop. I wasn't even thinking about what had happened at my mom's, laughing and getting out all the preliminary flirting before getting into the naughty stuff. I was on for about 5 minutes when I actually saw it myself. The same figure, flickering in and out of existence at an extremely fast rate. This time, it was bright in the room and the figure wasn't featureless. He looked like a normal man, other than the fact that where his jaw was supposed to be, there was just hanging muscle and broken teeth. And blood. A lot of blood. All down this guy's shirt. I asked my customer if he was seeing it, and he said he was. It started walking towards me. No, not really walking actually. I can't really explain it. It was moving towards me, but its legs weren't really moving. It was like bad stop motion. That's when my customer left, never came back for a refund either, and camera feed was dropped entirely. I sat in silence, waiting for something to happen, too afraid to make any movement. That's when the webcam, which was mounted on top of my computer monitor, lifted up into the air as it flew over my head and landed somewhere across the room. Afterwards, I told my roommates everything about what happened, beginning with showing them the cat video from the first incident. We discussed what we should do about it. They both even admitted to feeling uneasy in the house since I'd been back, and decided that getting rid of the webcam might help. We threw it in the garbage, and it came back. We threw it in the dumpster of the Starbucks down the block. It came back. It took several attempts before frustration took over and I smashed the goddamn thing and buried it in the backyard. It didn't come back after that, and I've never seen anything like that in my feed again. If my viewers have, they've never told me. I can't really explain any of it, but it definitely changed a lot for me. I spent so much time scared. I went from working every night to once a week, or even once a month sometimes. There were points where my roommates could have gotten impatient with me and kicked me out, but they didn't. I eventually got over the anxiety and became somewhat comfortable camming again, but there's still always a part of me keeping an eye out for him when I'm online. I don't know what that thing was, or why it was in my mother's apartment, or why it followed me home. I decided recently that I wanted to really contemplate everything that happened. Research eventually led me here. If you guys know where I should go from here, please let me know. During my first year of college, I was introduced to the Tor browser by my new roommate Ricky. Those of you who have been around the internet for long enough know Tor is a browser engine used to help you access the dark web, to which we frequently did. For a barely 20-year-old dude experiencing his first moments of living away from home, being handed a way to access nearly whatever I wanted just from the press of a few keys felt like being handed absolute freedom. While we mostly just used it for accessing pirated games and films, or maybe visiting a band website, there were times I found myself on the more twisted side of it all. I've honestly seen some pretty fucked shit that I really didn't want or need to see other than to satisfy my morbid curiosity of if it would be possible to even reach those places. While I mostly regret these deeper dives into the dark web, one such dive might have very well saved my life. It was about 2 a.m. on a Friday during the end of my third year of college, and Ricky had been spending the night at a cousin's house, leaving me to myself. I had been scrolling through the web, going through various shady movie sites and running games I didn't technically own, when I got a strange pop-up ad. One-time auction, limited items, one of a kind. Get now or never again. Don't miss out on these items, it read in a flashing red and green Comic Sans font. Now I've gone to a few of these dark web auctions, even participated in a few out of impulse bidding on things that triggered something in my dumb college dude brain. This ranged from things like overly engraved gold handguns you would see Tony Montana strapping, to pounds of the finest we'd grown in the purest soils of Jamaica, just to give me that little adrenaline rush of dude, what if I actually get it? Granted, I only ever bid 10, maybe $20 tops, knowing actually winning any of it would probably land me behind bars. I wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed and would have been busted within minutes of receiving the package. This one would be different, however. I decided I'd check out the auction and click the link before browsing through the bids. At first it wasn't anything serious, mostly firearms and drugs, typical black web catalog. As I moved down the list, the items got more extreme, much more extreme. The list started with simple low-caliber handguns you could get at Walmart in some states, but quickly changed to sniper rifles and LMGs fit for military elites, till I was eventually being offered small nuclear explosives claiming to have enough power to level small towns to ash and brimstone. Super strong pot and funny mushrooms quickly turned to advertisements for pounds of Colombian cocaine to 10-pound boxes of fentanyl pills. Shadiest of all are what I assume were experimental drugs. Black and yellow sludge-like substances held in test tubes that didn't even have real names, just things like XT. 1 and B8 plus asterisk RVV1/dash. Judging by the descriptions, these things fry your brain, considering the people selling it explain the effects through mostly incoherent, barely understandable sentences implying they've been indulging on their own supply. I remember one going along the lines of fun green bubbles, when super cool if eating you it's like green blue green bubbles, they fly up, eat up, fly down with the green bubbles. I might be paraphrasing on that, but trust me, it wouldn't have made any more sense than if I did get it spot on. Eventually I reached what I took to be the hitman and murderer catalog. Poison brews of resin and cyanide claiming to have 0 scent or taste, soundproof sneakers, weapon silencers, fake alas, passports. People were even selling codes that were apparently instructions on how to get to areas in your location where bodies are most often hidden and never found. There were other codes that were labeled as how-to instructional tapes made by professionals on how to get away with various types of murder to even murders. If you didn't want to do the work yourself, you could buy the phone number to a top-class hitman near you who will make sure your job is done effectively. Things only got worse when I scrolled to the next page to see photos of people, some even children, with their names listed underneath. They were advertising human trafficking and given each of their product a small biography of sorts, as if they were stat cards. It listed everything from address to allergies, strengths, weaknesses, even down to the daily routine. Now I've seen these kinds of black room type things and was well aware of how sick people can be on the dark web, but seeing it never got any less unsettling. Especially reading some of the things these bidders wanted to do with the product once they got their hands on them. This unsettlement quickly turned to unimaginable, agonizing fear as I scrolled down to see my own portrait, one taken on my first day of college. I began to panic as I read off my card. Whoever these people were, they knew my name, age, race, height, weight, even down to my small birthmark behind my ear. Not only that, but they seemed to have known my whole life story from birth. My panic only grew wider as I saw there were already 4 bidders, the highest of which bidding almost 15 grand. The sickest part was these bidders left comments. Things like he'd fit well with my collection, I can't wait to have his body, I wish to taste his skin, along with a slew of horrible, deranged shit they wanted to do with me that I really don't want to repeat. I fell back and began to hyperventilate. It felt my heart was going to give out and my brain was going to explode thinking of all the horrible things that may happen to me at the hands of these sick, twisted people who look to take ownership of my life. Most of the rest of the night was a blur. I remember bidding 20K off the bat to top the list, then periodically bidding I think another 3 what felt like every 30 minutes till I reached almost 40K. After that I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember was waking up curled into a ball under my desk in a puddle of cold sweat. It was still dark out, so the flashing lights coming from my monitor were all too noticeable. I could feel myself shaking in fear as I slowly crawled out from under the desk before slowly looking at my screen and seeing in large red Comic Sans congratulations. You win. Please list where you'd like to send your prize. We will send an agent to deliver your package. I felt an overwhelming amount of relief wash over my body seeing I had just bought myself. Sure, I ended up putting myself in near debt before I've even finished school, but I'm alive and free. Knowing those vile fucks wouldn't be able to live out their fantasies was enough for me to forget about any possible money problems. Think I even started laughing like a madman for a second as I entered Leave Them Be. I bought them their freedom so they don't suffer. Hoping that'd be enough explanation, and thankfully it was, as I was answered rather quickly with another message. Understood. Your product will be removed from all auctions and marked as sold. Thank you for your purchase, Evan. Reading that caused me to nearly collapse as if all the stress and tension built up drained from my body, only to quickly return as I reread the message. They knew I just bid on myself. They were still fucking watching. The next couple months were a living hell of paranoia and anxiety. I tried to explain what I could to Ricky, and he did his best to help calm me down, but it was fruitless. Eventually, though, after enough time, I was able to move on from it. More so, I think my mind forced me to block it out. But it's all come back now thanks to an email I had just received from Ricky almost 8 years after that night. Please help. I don't have the money to go up against the highest bidder. I responded as quickly as possible, asking for him to send me his PayPal or something. That was 2 days ago. I haven't gotten a response. I think he lost the auction. It's not every day that someone hires a private investigator, especially not my friend. She had her reasons, though. She suspected her husband of infidelity. When she shared what the PI had found with me, it piqued my interest. I'd always dreamed of becoming a PI, so I sheepishly asked her for the investigator's card. At the time, I had a lot of extra cash, and my life had been feeling dull. I spent most of my days playing games and watching YouTube, and I wanted to shake things up. So I decided to hire the same private investigator as my friend. I told my boyfriend about my plan, and he was into it too. We came up with a plan for him to act like I was missing, and submitted details about my family, occupation, and so on. I warned my boyfriend that we wouldn't be able to meet up while the investigation was happening, but he was fine with it. However, things quickly took a strange turn. When the PI got involved, he seemed to doubt my existence. My boyfriend had to convince him that I was real, and then the investigator kept accusing my boyfriend of wasting his time. Finally, on the 5th day of the investigation, my boyfriend called me in a panic. He claimed that the only person who had ever lived in the state with my name, which is very unique, had died a year before I was born. Even more eerily, this girl had lived in my childhood home. I thought my boyfriend was playing a prank, but his tone was bone-chilling. "I'm not playing a prank," he said. The PI even took me to the gravesite. It had your exact name, down to your middle name. I was shocked and didn't know what to do. I called my mother to ask her what was going on. Her demeanor changed to one of seriousness, and she told me to stay where I was. Meanwhile, I contacted the private investigator and begged him for answers. He only asked me more irrelevant questions, like where I was born and my parents' names. When I mentioned that my mother was on her way to my apartment, the PI asked for her full name. When I provided it, he told me to leave my apartment immediately and come to his office before my mother arrived. As I rushed to grab my keys, my mother pulled into my driveway with a man I didn't recognize. He was wearing a winter jacket despite it being spring, and I felt like something was off. Before I could leave, the man pulled out a gun. I recognized it as my boyfriend's Glock and ran to my neighbor's yard, expecting to be shot. Thankfully, nothing happened, and I eventually ran into my boyfriend's car. However, there was another man in the passenger seat. It was the private investigator. He explained to me that he had a theory that my parents were involved in a kidnapping that took place a few states over. They did this because the police had suspected them of neglecting their infant daughter, and when she ended up perishing, they had to completely replace the child as to not get caught. My parents had never mistreated me in my life, so this all came to me as a shock. Of course, I denied it all at first. However, there was no reason for my mother to bring an armed stranger into my living space. We got the authorities involved and they excavated the backyard of my childhood home. They found the body of the child they had neglected. The child they had me replace. Several years have passed since then. I've done my best to avoid thinking about this situation. I have completely moved out of country, leaving everyone behind. My friends, my boyfriend, and that private investigator. I have no idea of how deep this rabbit hole goes. I don't know how many connections my parents have had. I don't even know my father's role in all of this. It just feels all so overwhelming. I had to get it out there. "3 years after graduating college, I decided I needed a break from the corporate grind. The 45-minute commute, early mornings at the office, and late nights on the computer took their toll on my physical and mental health. This amount of stress culminated in me waking up one night with chest pains and feeling short of breath. Convinced I was having a heart attack, I called 911 and was transported to the ER. A few hundred in medical bills later, I was diagnosed with panic disorder. Although my mental health had never been perfect, I had never experienced anything this intense and was shocked stress could have this much of a physical effect. Against the advice of my parents, former academic advisor, and colleagues, I quit my first grown-up job less than 2 years in. Luckily, I'd always been somewhat of a saver and had worked my way through college, so I had some time to figure things out before the bills would start piling up. I found a much closer job at a small bar and grill called AL's. It was in a pretty remote location but was often pretty busy since it was the only restaurant and bar in the village. The atmosphere at the restaurant was like night and day compared to my office job. I could wear a t-shirt and jeans, start time was never earlier than 10 a.m., and my coworkers felt like friends rather than competition. I loved working there and still look back on the 2 years I spent there fondly, despite what happened. It was a Friday night and we were preparing to close at midnight. Sometimes we stayed open later, but the last few bar guests cleared out early that night. Jean, a server in her early 20s, sat at the counter counting her tips while Ben and I restocked the bar and washed the last few beer glasses. "Better hurry up before that fog spreads," Jean said in a joking voice. "You know I'm staying across the street tonight," Ben responded, sounding annoyed. Ben's parents lived just down the street from the restaurant and he would sometimes stay there if he was too tired or too intoxicated to drive home from the late shifts. I glanced outside. It didn't look too bad in the village, but out towards the main road leading back to where I lived, the fog was so thick the road disappeared. "Driving through that's gonna be a bitch," I said, shaking my head. Suddenly, Ben and Jean looked up from what they were doing. They exchanged tense-looking glances. "Where do you live?" asked Jean. "Orlington," I answered. Jean looked pale. "You realize you can't drive all the way back tonight, right?" she asked. "They should have let you go earlier before it got bad." "I mean, I have to," I said, confused. "Where else would I stay?" "You don't know anyone in town?" Jean asked. I shook my head. Then you can stay with me if you need to. You can crash on the couch, just don't go out in that fog at night, especially on 23. It's dangerous. There's so many accidents already with normal visibility. Imagine how dangerous it is when you can't see 10 feet in front of you. She wasn't wrong. 23 was notorious for deadly accidents, being a rural yet busy 2-lane highway with a ton of sharp turns. I had a few close calls driving to and from Ailes already. I was still shocked she offered to let me stay at her place. We were friendly, but she'd never given any indication she was interested in anything more. But her offering to let me stay over to avoid some minor driving conditions seemed extreme. It wasn't like it was a snowstorm. I agreed to stay the night, both for reasons of safety and being curious to see if she did see me as more than a friend. I had to help Ben put away a few things in the walk-in, so Jean said I could meet her outside and follow her to the apartment when I was done. Hey, do you think Jean's into me or something? I asked Ben once we were alone. I'm surprised she actually invited me to stay over. Ben shrugged. Maybe, he said. Ben wasn't his usual self tonight. He was usually outgoing and boisterous. On the slower weekend nights he was known to sneak some drinks back to the break room, but tonight he had been fairly quiet and remained completely sober. We got our closing tasks completed for the night, and I was getting ready to walk out the door when Ben stopped me. Hey man, seriously, don't drive in that fog tonight. I don't care what happens at Jean's. Just wait until morning to head back. This was out of character for Ben. He didn't have a reputation of being a safe driver. He regularly drove under the influence and wasn't opposed to street racing. I wanted to know why this was such a big deal to him, but was exhausted and knew Jean was outside waiting for me. I nodded. No worries. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, waving to Ben. It was less than a 5-minute drive to Jean's apartment. She lived in an older duplex. She grabbed some blankets and a pillow from the closet and put them on the couch for me. I thanked her. I felt pretty awkward at this point. It felt strange spending the night at her apartment when we only ever saw each other at work or the occasional bonfire or party. Luckily, Jean broke the ice by putting on a Marvel movie. We were both fans of the Marvel Universe. We watched a few movies, smoked, and ate some snacks. It was starting to be clear to me that she didn't have any interest in me romantically, but I was okay with that. She was still a good friend and I really enjoyed her company. After a while, my mind drifted back to Ben's strange demeanor tonight. Did you notice how Ben was tonight? He was quiet as hell and didn't have a single beer. Yeah, don't worry about it. He always gets like that when it's foggy out. He doesn't like to talk about it, but he saw a bad accident out there a few years ago when there was fog and it was hard to see. He wouldn't tell me much about it, but it must have been pretty gory. I nodded. That made sense. Jean decided to head to bed after the movie was over and I got settled in on the couch. I was just starting to doze off when my phone rang. I jumped up and quickly silenced it. It was my roommate, David. I figured whatever he was calling about could wait until morning and tried to go back to sleep. Then I saw a text. Call me now, it read in all caps. Annoyed, I got up and stepped out onto the porch to avoid waking Jean up. I called David back. What's so important you need to call me at 2 a.m.? I asked. Our fucking house got broken into, responded David. Are you kidding me? I asked. No, I just called the police and they're on their way. I just got home from Jenny's and it looks like the back door was kicked in. The lock's broke. The place is totally ransacked and our TV's gone. What about my Xbox? I asked, nervous. I'm sorry, man. I don't see it here, David responded. I'm on my way, I said and quickly hung up. I quietly gathered up my things and folded up the blanket. I decided to leave quietly and text Jean in the morning to let her know what happened. I didn't see the point in waking her up and I wasn't in the mood to be talked out of going to see what all had been stolen. I was getting angrier by the second. I hated how rampant theft was in Warlington and was even angrier remembering how many hours I spent at a job that almost killed me to earn everything I owned. I texted David to let him know I may take longer than usual to get home since I would have to go slow to get through the fog on 23. Once I got onto the highway and realized how thick the fog was, my rage subsided a bit. I knew I'd have to stay fully focused on driving. I was pretty tired, so I turned on the radio to help me stay alert. I drove 25 despite the 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. I couldn't see anything. This fog was the worst I'd ever seen. Even worse than snow blindness. Almost every station on the radio was breaking up. The only station I could get a signal on was some folkways-sounding country station. I eventually gave up and turned it off, annoyed. I started to see some light through the fog, so I slowed down a bit. I quickly realized there was a pickup truck on the side of the road with the hazard lights on. I slowed to a stop behind it and got out. There was a man who looked like he was in his 50s sitting in the driver's seat with the door open. He was mumbling and crying, head in his hands. Sir, are you okay? I asked. He continued to mumble and sob at the same time. Do you need help? I can call someone, I said. He looked up, appearing very distressed, and his face was very red. The phones don't work out here. We're screwed. We're dead, he said as he began to hyperventilate. What's going on? I can help you. I tried. They messed with my truck. I looked away for 1 minute and my truck won't start, he stammered. Look, man, it's okay. I'll call a tow truck for you and the police if you need me to. It'll be fine. He continued to sob and hyperventilate while I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I tried 3 times and the call wouldn't go through because of bad service. I knew this area didn't have the best reception, so I told him I was going to walk up the road a ways to try to get service. It's no use, he kept repeating. I started to feel like I was a little out of my element. I didn't know how to calm down someone who was hysterical, and I had no idea how his truck was damaged since it looked fine from the outside. If someone really did mess with his truck, were they still out here? I walked about 50 feet away from where we were parked and again tried to call 911. Still no service. I cursed Verizon's coverage and walked back to the man in the truck. Hey, I'm not having any luck right here, but if you want to come with me up the road to the gas station, we can call for help from there. No, he snarled. You're one of them. He began mumbling things under his breath that didn't make sense. I've been out here 6 fucking hours. Nothing's real. The road should have ended miles ago. I started to fear this may be a mental health issue rather than a car issue. It's okay. You're safe now. I can take you up the road and everything will be fine. The man didn't take this well and began fumbling around for something in the glove compartment. To my horror, he pulled out a shotgun. I stepped back. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to hurt you. It's fine, I'll go. He continued to point it at me until I was out of sight. I ran to my car, slammed the door, and peeled out of there. My heart was beating into my chest while I sped over the foggy road. When I couldn't see the truck headlights anymore, I slowed down, knowing I couldn't keep going this fast. I had trouble regulating my breathing, so I dug into my bag, trying to retrieve my anti-anxiety meds. I decided I was probably far enough away to pull over, so I did, and was luckily able to take my meds. I was sitting there, trying to get my bearings, when my phone rang. I quickly picked it up, happy to finally have service. It was Jean. "Where are you?" she asked. I could hear the concern in her voice and began to feel guilty. "I had to drive home. I'm sorry. It was an emergency," I explained. "Where are you now?" she asked. "I'm still on 23, about halfway to Warlington. I'm pulled over. I just had some weird shit happen and it scared the hell out of me." "You can't be out there alone like that, Owen. It gets really dangerous in ways you don't understand. I'm coming out to get you." "No, Jean, there's no reason for you to risk driving all the way out here. I just saw some paranoid dude and it freaked me out. It's not a big deal." I realized she hung up and tried to call her back. The call would not go through no matter where I moved my phone. "Damn it," I yelled, slamming my hands on the steering wheel. I didn't feel like I could leave because she knew where I was and was coming out here, but I also didn't want to sit parked on the side of a dangerous highway in the middle of a fog. After about 10 minutes, I walked out into the woods to pee and try to get better cell reception. As I was heading back to the car, I saw a faint light in the woods. I squinted and was able to see the silhouette of a person holding a lantern. The person looked heavy and somewhat tall, kind of like the man in the truck. I didn't want to stick around to see if it was him, so I booked it back to my car. The fog was thick in the woods as well, and it made it hard to see around the many trees. All of a sudden, I ran into something. It knocked the wind out of me and bloodied my nose. I jumped back, then looked up. "Owen," said Jean. "Jean, are you okay?" "Yeah, but walk much," she joked. "You shouldn't have come out here. It's impossible to see, and there's some delusional dude out here with a gun. I didn't want to leave you out here alone. We need to go before the fog gets worse," she said, following me back to the car. I didn't see how it was possible for the fog to get any worse. I'd driven in fog many times over the years and had never seen anything like this. It was like trying to see through milk. "Do you want me to drive?" asked Jean. "I've seen this before and I think I can do it." I nodded. It felt weird having her drive my car, but I was pretty shook up and she sounded confident. We continued on, albeit at a faster speed than I was comfortable with. I did suggest she slow down a few times and she would initially agree, but would quickly come back up to speed. I had no idea how she was able to see the road, let alone any other cars, not that there were any on the road. I tried to make conversation, but she was quieter than usual. She seemed tense. I decided it was probably best not to distract her. I eventually felt so uncomfortable with her speed that I asked if she could stop at the quick stop gas station that was a few miles before the exit to Warlington. It had to be coming up. She agreed to. By the time we reached Quick Stop, I was shaking with fear. Jean said she was going to stay in the car, so I went in alone. I locked myself in the bathroom and splashed some cold water on my face. My phone rang. It was Jean. "Hey," I answered. "Where are you?" I've been on 23 for like 10 minutes and haven't seen you. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Why, you're outside. Quick, stop waiting for me, I stammered. Stop messing with me, Jean. It's been a weird fucking night. Owen, listen to me. Whatever said quick stop with you, that's not me. I should have told you how serious this was before you left. Something paranormal that no one understands happens when the fog covers 23. It happened to my grandpa years ago. He was always really paranoid about fog, but never told anyone why. When he was in his twilight years, he told me more about what he saw out there. They can manipulate you and distort your perception. You don't have much time. They know you're out there. Okay, I stammered. I struggled to compose myself, breaking into a cold sweat. Jean's odd demeanor in the car began to make sense. Listen to me, find something to use as a weapon and don't let them know you're onto them until you're ready. I was frantically trying to ask what they were when the call cut out. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Owen, are you okay? I heard Jean's voice. I knew I needed to buy some time. I tried to sound as normal as possible. I'll be out in a second. Hey, can you go look in the car and see if I have a lighter? Yeah, just try to hurry up so we can get out of here, she answered. I heard her walk away, and when I heard the ding of the front door close, I quietly slipped out of the bathroom. I walked around the store looking for something, anything to use as a weapon. There was no one else at the store besides it being open 24/7, not even a cashier. Unfortunately for me, this wasn't one of those shady gas stations that sold brass knuckles and pocket knives. I glanced outside and noticed whatever was posing as Jean was standing off to the side of my car. If I could get in the car before her, I could take off. Seeing few other options, I made a break for it. The being posing as Jean must have picked up on my determination as she frantically tried to get back in the car. She was halfway in when I shoved her out as she screamed. Next thing I knew, she was in front of the car, and before I could hit my brakes, I felt the thrust of my car hitting something. I quickly threw my car in reverse and took off. I knew I had to get out of here. I sped up despite having no visibility. I called Jean back, and on the third try the call finally went through. Are you okay? She asked. Yeah. But what the fuck is happening? I yelled. It's too much to explain right now. Just focus on getting out. If you're past quick stop, it shouldn't be much longer. Just don't trust any interaction you have on 23 tonight. They're out. Who's they? I demanded. No one knows what they're called. They can shape-shift and distort things. Just get off the road as soon as you can. I continued driving at a slow but steady pace and was hopeful I would start to see the lights of Warlington ahead. However, to my horror, I noticed two blinking lights just feet away from me. I swerved to avoid hitting the car. A man ran up beside me and started to pound on my window. It was the guy from earlier in the truck. I wasn't sure if he was a regular guy or one of them, but I didn't want to take any chances. I tried to speed up to get around him, but the loose gravel slowed me down. Please, man, I'm sorry about earlier. I have a wife and 2 kids at home. I need to get out of here. Please help. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and he got in. I wasn't sure why I took this risk, besides the fact that he did try to warn me earlier. That, and he has a gun that may be needed at some point. Where's the gun? I asked. He sat it on the middle seat. "It'll stay right there, I won't touch it," he promised. I took off, unsure if I made the right decision. I learned that the guy's name was Josh and that he lived on the other side of Warlington. He seemed like a very normal guy, and I began to feel more at ease as the drive continued. "What brought you to 23 tonight?" I asked casually. He chuckled and looked out the window. This seemed strange, and I suddenly had a bad feeling. I kept a close eye on him. He glanced over and I caught a look into his eyes. They were gray with no visible pupil. I remembered him having brown eyes when I saw him by his truck. This wasn't him. I slammed on the brakes, and at the same time we both reached for the gun. He lunged at me in an attempt to grab it out of my hands. We struggled for a moment over the gun. I was able to grab it and pulled the trigger as he lunged at me. The shot made my ears ring. I began to panic. I had to pull him out of the car, then I tossed the gun into the woods. Luckily my car head wasn't hit by the bullets since his window was open. I was shaking, speeding off into the night. It felt like I'd been on this road for hours. I tried to call Gene several more times. The call dropped a few times, then rang. "Are you okay?" I asked frantically. Yeah, I had to turn around. It was getting too dangerous. "I'm sorry I couldn't help," Gene said through tears. "It's okay. Another one tried to get me, but I'm almost out," I told her. We stayed on the phone until Gene arrived home safely. Our connection was beginning to cut out again, so I let her know I would let her know when I got home. It felt like a miracle when I began to see the lights of Warlington. The fog rapidly thinned out as I turned off of 23. Breathing a sigh of relief, I sped home, still shaking and sweating. When I arrived home, David greeted me. "What did the police say?" I asked, trying to sound as normal as possible. At this point, a break-in was the least of my worries. An expression of genuine confusion crossed David's face. "What?" he asked. "Police?" I glanced around the living room. Nothing looked out of place and nothing was missing. That said, I knew it wasn't in my best interest to sound crazy. "Did you hear about any break-ins around here?" "Someone at work said there was one in Warlington tonight." I improvised. David looked confused. "No, I haven't heard anything." I went to bed and tried to get some sleep. I had no idea what happened, but assumed I'd gotten through the worst of it. One thing I was certain of is that I would never drive on 23 in the fog again. I woke up early the next morning and quickly got ready for work. When I realized this would involve going on 23, I hesitated. I stepped outside and the sky was crystal clear. I looked on Google Maps to see if there was another way to AL's. There were some back roads I could take, but it would take almost twice as long. I decided to bite the bullet and go. I took my meds and left. Everything looked normal. The radio also worked better this time, and the music helped me stay calm. Eventually I began to relax. I remembered I was almost out of gas, so I went to turn into Quick Stop but had to slam on the brakes when I noticed the yellow tape and multiple police cars. I cautiously pulled around to drive away when I noticed Ben and several other people from the village standing at the edge of the tape. I parked my car across the street and walked over. "Ben, what's going on?" I asked. Ben turned around and I was shocked to see he was crying. He shook his head. Gene was hit. "Whoever did it took off. didn't even call for help. Some guy from Warlington got shot further up the road too. I think he worked at the hardware store in the village. I started shaking. Where's Jean now? I asked even though I already knew. She's gone. I'm sorry, Ben said. I began hyperventilating. I stepped away and ran back to my truck. I shut myself in, slamming my fists into the steering wheel and wailing. Ben walked over and was trying to calm me down, but I was inconsolable. I'll never get over it. I was never convicted or even questioned because the security footage at Quick Stop wasn't working the night of the fog. I later checked my call records and there was only one call from her that night, the first one she made to me to tell me she was coming to find me. There was no record of the call from David. I quit AL's, broke my lease, and was moved out of state by the end of the week. I can't shake the quilt I feel daily, and I'll never forget how Jean tried so hard to keep me out of the fog. I'll never drive in fog again. Let's be real, you've heard whispers about the deep web. It's not a playground. Some folks are hunting for weed, guns, or just plain thrills. Others are definitely up to no good. But I'm not here to talk about those creeps. I'm talking about what lies beyond that. The truly bizarre, the stuff nobody's supposed to stumble upon. There was this infographic floating around a while back, the 8 levels of the internet. Maybe you've seen it. Cool concept, but total garbage. Polymeric falsical derivation? Come on. And the pre-March system? Sounds like someone's been binge-watching Warhammer. No quantum mechanics here, I promise. But that doesn't mean this place was easy to find. I'm not going to give you directions. You probably couldn't get there even if I did. Not bragging, it's just I had nothing else going on in my life. I was warned, of course. Everyone said I wouldn't like what I found, that I wouldn't even understand it. Now I'm passing that warning on to you. Don't go looking for this. There's no official name for this place, at least not that I saw. Rumors flew around, though. Everything from an Illuminati chat room to a virtual prison for a rogue AI. The reality was way worse. After months of cracking firewalls, decoding encryption, solving these weird philosophical riddles, and chasing hidden links, I finally landed on a blank page. One line of text stared back at me. Quid queries? Latin for what do you seek? I was surprised, I guess. Looking back, I don't know what I expected. I didn't have a goal. I just wanted to see if I could do it. I tried some basic answers at first. The truth, enlightenment, you know, matrix stuff. Nothing. I threw a bunch of answers at it, but nothing worked. I was getting seriously frustrated. Maybe this was a hoax. Maybe I hadn't figured anything out after all. If only. Then, out of the blue, I typed in what also seeks me. I have no idea why. It was like a random thought. Maybe it was an AI. To my shock, the page went completely blank. I waited. After about 5 minutes, it redirected me to something that looked like a forum. Scratch that. Even more basic. Just a list of links against a brownish-yellow background. The links themselves were gibberish. Random strings of characters, symbols, and letters. Some I'd never even seen before. It looked like an alien language. Obviously, just a code I didn't understand. My expectations were through the roof at this point. Each link was a shot in the dark. I clicked the first one. It loaded a live feed of what looked like the Paris catacombs. I watched for a bit, but it was just uneventful. I moved on to the next link. It was a shaky video, dark setting. I could make out guys in tactical gear. They were inside a house, clearing rooms. Then they kicked down a door and there it was, a creature. Tall, humanoid, scaly skin. It was gnawing on a dismembered arm. They opened fire, but it bolted out a window. The video cut there. I was floored. What the hell was that? It looked way too real to be some movie outtake. I was hooked. Maybe this whole thing was worth the months of headaches and bloodshot eyes. I couldn't stop now. I started going down the list, link after link. Each one got weirder, more disturbing. I found a document called the Paragon Project, detailing human experiments to create super soldiers. Apparently, it worked. And it looked official, too. There were essays on space-time anomalies, glitches in reality, even photos of what looked like alternate dimensions. Detailed explanations of Area 51, the Bermuda Triangle, assassinations, disappearances, the real story of the Holy Grail. One of the more unsettling ones was about a world-ending bomb, a nuke 720,000 times stronger than Hiroshima. I don't even want to know why anyone would build that. I found contingency plans for all kinds of apocalypses, nuclear winter, bioweapons, viral outbreaks. Some of the titles were just bizarre. The Marianas Trench abnormality, the bluntly named strange man on the 15th floor, and just blackout. Recovered logs of skinwalker hunts, 911 transcripts from a town in Texas that vanished in 1977, even the journals of the people involved in the Dyatlov Pass incident. They didn't freeze to death, something else got to them. I spent hours there, scrolling through pages of stuff I felt like I shouldn't be seeing. I found a trailer for a silent film from 1910, one that supposedly drove people mad and almost killed the entire film industry. There was a live stream of a hooded figure hunched over in front of a camera. Then it lifted its head. It had no mouth, but a deep, guttural hello came through my speakers. I knew it came from it. I didn't stick around for that. There were step-by-step guides for things like cutting off your own limbs and sewing them onto corpses, performing rituals in the middle of Siberia, going to coordinates that supposedly housed captive fallen angels. It was never clear what any of it was supposed to do. There was also a 20-second clip titled "The Futility of the Living." I didn't watch it. That's when it hit me. No way even the most powerful government controlled all of this. One of the scariest things was that the list of links just kept going. No matter how far I scrolled, it never ended. I think I just crashed eventually, woke up on my floor in the middle of the night. My computer screen showed looped helicopter footage of a massive, crab-like creature tearing apart a coastal island. I shut it off. I just sat there for the longest time. I couldn't process what I'd seen, and honestly, I didn't want to. I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a small message in the bottom left corner. I had to squint to read it. More Latin. Are you satisfied? Underneath were two options, yes and no. I knew the answer. Hell no, I wasn't satisfied. I was terrified, probably scarred for life. But I should have clicked yes. If I just clicked yes, it would have taken me out of that godforsaken place, back to some semblance of sanity. Even now, I can't tell you why I clicked no. But I did. The page refreshed. Same basic layout, but only 4 links this time. These weren't numbers or characters. They didn't look like anything from this world. Just a jumble of crude symbols, no pattern, no sense of direction. I clicked the first one. About 20 seconds in, I slammed my laptop shut. I can't describe what I saw. I know I wasn't supposed to see it. Nobody should see something like that. It wasn't just that it didn't make sense. I can't even tell you why it didn't. I couldn't grasp the images. It wasn't graphic, not in a gory way. I just couldn't recognize anything. I could see things moving, but not like any creature on Earth moves. Colors I'd never seen before. Just thinking about it gives me a splitting headache. Here's the best I can do to explain it. We live in 3 dimensions. We move forward, backward, left, right, at a 72.4-degree angle southwest, whatever. These things weren't limited by that. I can't explain it any further. All I know is I didn't want to watch another second. I don't think I could have. I left my room. For the first time in ages, I was going outside. I needed fresh air. A walk, a run. I was half tempted to run a marathon in the middle of the night just to clear my head. I was putting on my jacket when I heard a knock at the door. I froze. Obviously, I wasn't opening it. Another minute, 5 more knocks, then someone spoke. Open up. We know what you did, but we're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. The voice wasn't threatening. Eventually, I gave in. I opened the door to 2 tall, slim guys in suits. They smiled. Can we come in? I still don't know how they found me. I thought I was off the grid. We sat on the couch. I was just waiting for answers at this point. One of them looked at me. What were you looking for? I don't know. But I'm not going back, I said. He smiled again, like that's what he wanted to hear. The other one spoke up, his tone sharper. Who do you work for? I shook my head. Look, I didn't know what I was getting into. I wasn't looking for anything. They just stared at me for a while. I'm not going to tell anyone. Trust me. They finally responded, we're not worried about that. Doubt anyone would believe you. Another smile. It almost felt genuine. We just wanted to know what your priorities were. Looking back, that was a really weird question. Just do us a favor and we'll leave. I perked up. Give us the device you used to access it. I didn't argue. I ran upstairs and practically threw my laptop at them. They smirked one last time and left. As they were walking out, one of them turned back. I don't think I need to tell you, but don't try this again. And don't show anyone else how to get there. We'll know. I didn't ask who they were. I'm not sure I wanted to know. It's been a week now. I barely go online anymore. After all that, I'm trying to forget, to push it out of my mind. I've started having these awful nightmares. I'm seeing a therapist, but it's not really helping. I'm trying not to let it ruin my life, but I'm not sure that's even possible. There are some things we're not supposed to know. Probably for our own good. Don't go looking for them. It's better that way. But it might be too late for me. They say curiosity killed the cat. It feels like a personal attack right now. I haven't forgotten that night. How could I? What the hell was that last thing I saw? The weird thing is, it never shows up in my nightmares. It's always the other stuff. I swear, I see that mouthless guy every time I close my eyes. But maybe that's not so weird. My brain couldn't process it the first time, so how could my subconscious recreate it? I don't want to think about it anymore. But I can't not think about it. It's not just in my head anymore. I thought I was done with this after the suit showed up. I was wrong. Delusional, even. After what I saw. It doesn't work like that. The world isn't that simple. Here's what's been happening. Wednesday. I've been back at work for 3 days, and I think I'm being followed. No, I'm sure I am. They're using different cars, but it's always the same routine. After work, I get in my car, and another car tails me until I pull into my driveway. Then they just drive past. Once, fine. But 3 times? Under normal circumstances, I call it a coincidence. But not now. I don't know what they want. Maybe they're just watching me. I hope that's all it is. If that's the case, I'll just keep my head down. Give them what they want. Thursday. I tried to get a look at them in my rearview mirror. Tinted windows. Great. Again, I pulled into my driveway, and they kept going. I said I'd keep my head down, but this is messing with me. I don't want to deal with this. They're getting closer each time. Friday. I switched things up. Took the bus instead of driving. I needed a drink more than ever, so I hit a bar after work. It was also an experiment to see how closely they were tracking me. I couldn't stop glancing out the windows the whole time. After a few drinks, I hailed a cab. Surprise, surprise, there they were, right behind us. But here's the thing, it was the same car as yesterday. They dropped the whole incognito act. I don't know how I feel about that. And something else changed. They didn't just drive past this time. After the cab dropped me off, I turned around, and that damn car was parked half a block away. I just went inside. What else could I do? Calling the cops didn't even cross my mind. I don't think it would have helped anyway. It's been 3 hours, and they're still out there. I haven't been watching them constantly, so I don't know if anyone's even in the car. That's not a fun thought. There's no way I'm sleeping tonight. It's about 2 a.m. now. I just got a text. Private number. It read, "Leave your house. Don't use the front door, they're still there. Go to the all-night diner about 5 blocks away. Don't drive, they'll know. Be quick, they're coming in soon. Don't get followed. Leave your lights on. I froze after reading the text. They're coming in? For what? Who the hell was texting me? I don't know what you would have done, but I took the warning seriously. Paranoia was through the roof. Tired and buzzed, I threw on a jacket and slipped out the back door, grabbing my backpack with my other laptop inside. I don't know why I took it, but it felt important. I waited a beat before climbing over the fence. When I was sure nobody had seen me, I started towards the diner. It took about 40 minutes, longer than it should have, because I was diving into bushes every time a car passed. I finally reached the diner. I scanned the place, a table of loud college kids, a couple of truckers, and a guy in a hoodie hunched over a laptop in the back. He didn't look threatening, actually kind of scrawny. I took a guess and walked over. I sat down across from him. He looked up. Hi. What do you want? You texted me. There was a pause. I got worried for a second. What if it wasn't him? But he broke the silence. Right. They following you? No, I don't think so. He nodded. All right. Then he laughed, like it was a joke. Man, you screwed up, didn't you? Hard to argue with that. What were you even doing? What were you trying to find? Nothing, I swear. Just did it for kicks, I guess. He stared at me in amused disbelief. Oh, well, that's lame. Would have been cool if you were a spy or something. He chuckled again. Look, who are you? How did you know they were after me? Who are they, anyway? I fired off the questions. All right, settle down. I'm not telling you who they are. I don't know either. But they're not friendly. Great, I thought. Well, how do you know about them? He paused. They came after me. 1 minute I'm reading about demons on the moon, the next, my door's getting kicked in. Months ago. I skipped town. I was confused. Wait, what do you mean? They tried to kill me, dude. I couldn't believe it. And you just viewed the links? That was it? You teaching other people how to get there or something? He raised an eyebrow. No. Why? I was floored. They didn't do that to me, I said. They just showed up, took my laptop, gave me a warning. Now it was his turn to look shocked. Really? He seemed to think for a moment. Then he asked what they looked like. Just guys in suits, I said. What did they ask you? He followed up. I told him. Then I remembered their last question. They also asked what my priorities were. Weirdest question ever. His face went blank. Yeah, strange, ain't it? An uncomfortable silence hung in the air. I finally asked what had been bugging me since that night, that page with the 4 links. What the hell is that? He raised an eyebrow and said he didn't know what I was talking about. That's when things got really weird. After I gave him a rough description of what I'd seen, his expression changed completely. I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear? Recognition? What did you type at the prompt? He asked. What also seeks me, I answered. I was totally lost. Isn't that what you did? He shook his head. No. He shut his laptop and stood up. Where are you going? I asked. We've been here too long. Look, I know you have questions, but I can't answer them. Get a motel tonight. He turned and walked out. Just like that. What was I going to do? Stop him? I still have no idea who he is. The only thing I got was a name, Jackson. Probably fake. Tired and still a little drunk, I left the diner, keeping to the shadows as I looked for a motel. Not exactly a fun experience. Now I'm in some rundown motel at 4:30 a.m. Barely any sleep. I've got this awful feeling in my gut, like something's seriously wrong. I flipped on the TV, anything to distract me. It did the opposite. It was a news report. A guy strangled to death in a KFC bathroom. The victim was one of the suits who came to my place and took my laptop. No suspects. I just stared at the screen. What the hell was going on? My phone buzzed. Another private number. The message. Go to the swimming pool on 5th Street. In the men's locker room, locker 128. Combination is December 27th, 33. Further instructions inside. Go before this gets intercepted. Leave your phone. Of course. How could I be so stupid? I still had my phone. Whoever was after me could track it. I hadn't even thought of that. I glanced out the window. The car that had been tailing me was parked right there. I finally got a look at the driver and passenger getting out. Gloves, one of them carrying a briefcase. They were heading for the entrance. I had to move fast. After emailing everything to myself and a friend, I dropped my phone in the toilet. I had to ditch this laptop too. People needed to know what was happening. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it out of this mess. I heard someone messing with the lock. They were picking it. I've never been good under pressure, but when you think you're about to die, your survival instincts kick in. The balcony. Only way out. I ran out and climbed over. Luckily, I was on the 2nd floor. No broken legs. Now, run or hide. Neither seemed great. I was panicking. Then I saw it, a cab across the parking lot. I bolted. I tapped on the window, startling the driver. "Mr. Horvat?" he asked. I wasn't Horvat, but I nodded anyway. "You said 8:40, right?" He looked confused. "Finished early. Let's go." My voice was tight, but I tried to sound normal. I didn't need this guy freaking out and driving off. I got in, gave him the address, and we sped away. As we left, I looked back. The 2 men from the motel were on the balcony, staring right at me. Relief washed over me, but it didn't last long. Go before this gets intercepted. I was still on the clock. If they didn't know where I was going, they would soon. 15 minutes later, we arrived. I rushed into the locker room. Mostly empty. I kept repeating the combination, 12 left, 27 right, 33 left. I found the locker, swung it open. Inside, an old BlackBerry and an envelope. Inside the envelope, a plane ticket, 2,000 in cash, and a sticky note. In terrible handwriting, check phone, password, snake tracks. I turned on the ancient phone. I used to beg my parents for one of these. This wasn't how I imagined getting one. I checked the phone. No apps, no pictures, nothing. Just one contact, call me. So I did. One ring, and someone answered. They sounded hesitant. Who is this? Ah. What was I supposed to say? My name? I got your message, I finally said. A pause. Then, what's your religious affiliation? The tone was aggressive. Why was he asking that? I didn't have the energy to argue. Raised Protestant, but now, agnostic, I guess. He sighed in relief and hung up. Then a message came through, an address and a room number. Meet me. I stared at it for a second before realizing how stupid I was. I should have just taken the stuff and run. Then I heard the locker room door swing open. Footsteps running towards me. I panicked. I shoved everything in my pockets and looked for an escape. The pool entrance. I ran, gunshots ringing out behind me. Silencers, but they were close. A sharp pain in my side. A bullet hit a locker right in front of me. I ran faster, nearly slipping into the pool as I burst through the emergency exit. The lifeguard yelled after me. I kept running, making turns, checking behind me. Luckily, I was downtown. I blended into the crowd. I saw 2 cops at one point. I almost told them, but what would that do? They'd search, find nothing, watch my place for a few days, and that would be it. I ducked into a hair salon. I couldn't run anymore. The barber looked at me like I was crazy. I got him to shave my head. I spent the rest of the day buying stuff, a used laptop, new clothes, bandages, sunglasses. The flight was in a few hours. I called a cab and headed to the airport. Now I'm on a plane to Scottsdale, Arizona. Haven't been out of state in 6 years. Always meant to, but not like this. Let me rewind. After ditching the laptop, I heard the lock give. They were inside. The balcony. I climbed over, dropped to the ground, and spotted a cab across the lot. I tapped on the window, pretending to be Mr. Horvat. It worked. We sped away just as the 2 men appeared on the balcony. At the swimming pool, I found the locker, grabbed the BlackBerry, the cash, the ticket, and the note, check phone, password, snake tracks. The phone had one contact, call me. I called. The voice was hesitant, then aggressive. What's your religious affiliation? I told him, raised Protestant, now agnostic. He sighed in relief and hung up, then sent an address and room number, meet me. I should have run, but I didn't. Then the gunshots in the locker room. I ran, barely dodging bullets, burst out the emergency exit, and disappeared into the downtown crowd. I got a quick haircut to change my appearance and spent the day buying new clothes and supplies. Then I headed to the airport. Now, here I am, in Scottsdale. The heat hit me like a wall. I took another cab to the address, a Holiday Inn. How fitting. I knocked on the door. What if it was a trap? I almost ran. But I didn't. The door opened. It was the other suit, the one who didn't get strangled. He had a black eye, a busted lip, and looked exhausted. "Nice haircut," he muttered. He sat on the bed. I sat on the couch. Silence. He stared at the floor. Finally, he spoke. "Might as well tell you what's going on. About 4 years ago, there was an incident in the Paris catacombs." Chills ran down my spine. 4 teenagers wandered off during a tour. They got lost. The police searched everywhere. Nothing. The government set up infrared cameras. One day, they caught something on camera. It was, hell manifested. A twisted mass of limbs, somehow held together, squirming across the screen. 4 human heads were stuck to the top. You can guess who they were. I was speechless. I thought of that catacombs video. Glad I hadn't watched it to the end. He continued. They sent in an elite team. It took 12 men to put it down. They had to decide what to do with the video. They couldn't destroy it, but they couldn't let anyone see it. This was around the time of the Snowden leaks, so they didn't trust government servers. That's where the website comes in. They got the best tech experts to bury it deep in the internet. Deeper than anyone could go. Nobody was supposed to find it. Nobody was even supposed to know what to look for. I tried to process this. I was good with computers, but no match for government experts. How did I find it? He went on. It worked for a while. They made a deal with governments worldwide. Anything considered too dangerous for public knowledge went on that site. They even added a safeguard. For every real item, they posted 4 fake ones. For the few who actually found it. Wait, what? I was stunned. He chuckled. Yeah. Most of that stuff was BS. Most. The videos are harder to fake. I felt a flicker of relief. Just a flicker. He continued. The idea was that people would investigate the stuff they found. Since most of it was fake, they'd hit dead ends and dismiss the whole site as a hoax. That was the idea, anyway. I knew where this was going. What about the people who investigated the real stuff? He sighed. Look, nobody cared if they told their friends or posted about it online. People would think they were crazy. It was the ones who found proof, who wanted to go public, they got silenced. He saw I was about to object and cut me off. Don't give me that moral stuff. They didn't have to do it. It was their choice. They were breaking the rules. Do you think the public knowing about any of this would help? No. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, all right? I had to admit, he had a point. But then things went to hell, he continued. Breaches went from 2 a month to 20, then 50. They investigated. Apparently, rumors were spreading on the deep and dark web. About a site with secrets nobody was supposed to see. They tested how easy it was to find, just using forums and stuff. It took their experts 20 minutes, solving riddles and following hidden links. Then there was the final prompt. What do you seek? There are a lot of answers that work. He nodded. It didn't make sense. Everyone who knew about the site was questioned. Someone had to be behind this, right? Nobody confessed. Everyone seemed genuinely clueless. After a massive investigation, nothing. Then it hit them. Back in 2010, they finalized an experimental AI. I'll spare you the details, but it went rogue. They couldn't control it. Just when they thought they had it trapped, it vanished. I think it found that website, and it's been guiding people there ever since. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a weariness I understood all too well. That last page, those 4 links, that wasn't part of the original site. That was it. The AI. Showing you something else. Something it's found beyond what we understand. He then gave me some money, a new identity, and instructions to disappear. He said he was doing the same. He didn't know how much time we had. He didn't know what the AI wanted. He just knew it wasn't good. I'm still running. I don't know what's coming next. I don't know if I'll ever be safe. I just know I saw something I shouldn't have. And now, I'm paying the price. The click echoed in my ear, sharp and final. It was Jake's turn. He gritted his teeth, let out a sigh, and tossed the gun back onto the table. It spun a few times before stopping in front of his opponent. My chest felt tight. If my hands weren't strapped down, I'd be chewing my nails to the quick. Instead, they burned against the leather. My stomach churned, a mess of nerves ready to explode. Someone's going down. We're about to see someone. Don't get yourself worked up, Mark said. I turned to him and scoffed. Easy for you to say. Look at this crap, look what's happening. I jerked my head towards the glass wall in front of us. We had a clear view of the arena where Jake and Sarah were facing off. They sat on opposite sides of a plain table, a harsh light hanging directly above them. Behind them stood this guy in a ridiculous leprechaun mask, wearing his suit and tie. We called him Lucky, or sometimes something less polite. Lucky held the mic close. His voice boomed through the speakers. And after a dramatic first pull, it looks like Jake's playing it safe for round 1. Smart move. Let's hope that caution pays off. Now, Sarah. Your turn. 5 agonizing minutes later, Sarah finally reached for the pistol. Tears streamed down her face. You could see the red mark of a slap on her cheek. Lucky took a step towards her, and Sarah's hand jerked up, the gun pointed at her own face. This is messed up, I muttered. Poor girl. Hope she gets lucky, David said. Lucky crouched down and put a hand on her back. Come on, Sarah. I spun the chamber for you, halfway there already. One little pull, one little squeeze, and it's all over. Sarah mouthed something we couldn't hear. I said pull the trigger. Damn it, Sarah. Lucky yelled. Bang. The side of Sarah's head splattered against the glass wall opposite us. I choked back vomit. Lucky wiped himself off with a napkin. Whoa, chat. Bit of spray there. Sarah from Block B is out. Congrats, Jake. Who the heck is Chat? Mark asked. He keeps saying that. Who's he talking to? Us. We're the entertainment. Haven't you figured it out yet? David said. I spotted a computer in the corner of the arena. Behind Lucky was a shelf with a laptop on it. A red light blinked where the camera would be. Lines of code scrolled up the screen. No way. I whispered, tears welling up. David sighed. Sickos. All of them. Mark shifted in his restraints. So, what's the plan? What plan? We're screwed. We're tied up. There is no plan. There's no way out, I said. That's not true, David said. Listen. When they come back for one of us, let me do the talking. Mark and I nodded. Well, that brings up the question, Mark said. Who's next after Sarah? If it's random, who knows? But if they're going down the line, then it's Ethan. Then you, Mark, David said. I swallowed hard. Then me. David nodded. Then I'm last. But like I said, with some talking, I think I can get us out of this. You hear that, Ethan? We all looked to our left at Ethan. He hadn't said a word since we woke up here. His face was mostly in shadow, his chin tucked down, and his lips moved constantly, like he was whispering some secret to himself. Ignore him, Mark said. Probably drugged up. Maybe doesn't even know where he... Two guys in the same leprechaun masks as Lucky burst into the room. I held my breath. They went straight for Ethan and untied him. He didn't even flinch. David spoke up. Wait, I have an offer. I don't know how much you know about us, but I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. Just give me a minute before you take him. Please. The men holding Ethan stopped. A deal? I can cut you in on some serious cash. $100,000 each. Cash, check, whatever. I can even go higher. What do you say? Go talk to your boss. The two men looked at each other, nodded, and one went to whisper in Lucky's ear. Sarah's body was being taken out of the arena by other masked figures. Ethan would take her place. Lucky turned towards our glass wall. Chat, I've just been informed that a contestant from Block B, David, is trying to buy his way out. Get this, David, you think money is the answer to everything. Wrong. I hope you have a good seat. Because that's all you're gonna get. I dropped my head. So much for that, Mark said. David thrashed in his chair. You don't know who you're messing with. Untie me and I'll tear you apart with my bare hands. David, come down. You're last in line. You have the best chance. Make the most of it, Mark said. Besides, he can't hear you. Round 2, Jake versus Ethan. Ethan was rigid, sweat pouring down his face. Jake, on the other hand, was completely blank. Hunched over, his lips barely moving. Lucky went over and patted him on the back. Poor Jake. Things aren't looking good for you. Bad seating and the odds of winning twice in a row are pretty slim. So, Why? Why are you here? You must have some idea. Jake looked up at him, almost squinting. Okay, you can blame me. But think bigger. We know how you're here, but why would our paths cross? You were abandoned, but why? Tell me, Jake. Jake whimpered into the mic. What was that? Come on, you've got guts now. Speak up. Jake cleared his throat. My secretary and my wife. But Sarah didn't deserve that. It was all me, not her. I get it. Relax, Jake. She died before you did, after all. Maybe she was messing around with your brother or something. Larger text appeared on the computer screen. Some kind of notification, I guessed. Lucky turned and read it aloud. Thank you, Anonymous 4441, for the generous donation of 0.00054. They say, LOL, this is so fun, you should make all contestants confess a sin every round. Great idea. So great I wish I'd thought of it. I will take your advice. But I made it clear I don't like people telling me how to run my show. So, Anonymous 4441, hope you have a good proxy, because you'll regret that. But yes, Ethan from Block B, your turn to confess. Why do you think you're here? Ethan had the mic shoved in his face. He stared directly at Lucky and said, It's all in the cards. Mark, David, and I exchanged glances. This guy's definitely out of it, Mark said. David sighed. Poor guy. He's lost it. Excuse me? Lucky said. Okay, maybe you didn't understand. You're here for a reason. Confess something that you think is a worthy reason as to why you're in this mess. You will answer this, Ethan. You will make sense, or else. The mic was back in Ethan's face. Again, the same blank stare. It's all in the cards. My jaw dropped. This guy's got a death wish. Lucky went silent, then muttered something into his mic. He glanced at the laptop. The text on the screen was flying by faster. He facepalmed his mask. Fine, Ethan. You win. And since you're such a comedian, how about you go first? This is the end of part 1. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with part 2. I'll focus on maintaining this style and format as we move forward. I remember Ethan's hand shaking as he gripped the pistol. The magnum trembled like jelly. When he held it to his forehead, tears streamed down his face. He just sat there for about 5 minutes. Not so tough now, are you? Lucky taunted. Time's up. You've got 40 seconds to pull that trigger. Oh, and before you splatter your brains, remind the audience of your little saying. Ethan looked back at him, his lips tight, eyes red. It's all in the cards. As he said cards, he pulled the trigger. Click. The cylinder spun. Back to the center of the table. Jake didn't move. He was frozen, his mouth hanging open, staring at the gun. 5 minutes ticked by. Lucky tried everything, waving his hands, snapping his fingers in Jake's face. He put his mouth close to Jake's ear. Hello? I know you hear me. It's your turn. Unless you want me to do it for you. The audience is getting impatient. I looked at David. Is Jake? He nodded. This could get ugly. Then, just like that, a spark returned to Jake's eyes. He huffed, grabbed the magnum, jammed it against his ear, and pulled the trigger. 3 clicks. Then, on the 4th, the gun fired. You've got to be kidding me, Lucky said. I wanted to jump out of my chair, but the restraints held me tight. Holy crap, why did he do that? A man wants to control his own fate. I respect that. Might do it myself, Mark said. Actually, I'd aim it right at that masked freak. Not a bad idea, David said. But Lucky's got one of his own, and it's loaded. That first click, and he'll draw. Probably wearing a vest too. Then his goons will gun you down. That's the point. I'll take him out with me. Still a gamble, David said. Mark smirked. This whole damn thing's a gamble. Lucky turned to the laptop. Since Jake couldn't follow simple instructions, Ethan wins by default. All right, take out this trash and bring in the next blockade contestant. Round 3, Ethan versus Benny. Dragged into the arena was a guy with a red and blue afro, no shoes, a big red nose, and a spotted onesie. Benny had streaks of black makeup running from his eyes down his cheeks. He sat in Jake's old chair. Lucky reloaded the magnum, spun the cylinder, and told Benny to confess a sin. Let me guess. You live in some dump, snorting coke before work. Maybe some minor charges, if you know what I mean. But you always sweep it under the rug and find another job. Hey, screw you. You judge me by how I make a living, Benny said. Let me tell you something. My life's full of screw-ups. I've done bad things. But I still mow my neighbor's lawn for free. I save every penny to get my daughter toys. I'm a vegetarian and organ donor. My family loves me. So, you do what you gotta do. And yet you're in that chair and I'm not, Lucky said. Get off your high horse and pick up that gun. Or better yet, prove all that and win this thing. Benny hung his head. That's not fair, you know it. Click. Spin. Ethan went first. Click. Spin. Then Benny. Click. Spin. Click. Spin. Benny used every second of his 5 minutes each turn. He hit himself in the head, clenched his jaw so hard I thought it would break. When the barrel was at his face, he made these grunting noises before every pull. When it clicked, the relief was palpable. Ethan, on the other hand, was quick. His brow was smooth, his lips relaxed. Fewer tears, less fidgeting. Each flinch after a pull was less violent. When the gun returned to the table, he looked down, his lips moving like before. This time, though, I could see his mouth clearly. It's all in the cards. It's all in the cards. I can't watch this anymore, I said. Something's not right about Ethan, Mark said. 9 clicks. Benny's face was a mess. He looked ready to collapse. Lucky clapped. We've reached round 10. One more empty pull and we're in sudden death. We rarely get this far. Did he say sudden death? I don't want to know what that is, I said. Benny was about to pull for the 11th time when Lucky stopped him. Hold it, Lucky said, snatching the gun. We're in sudden death. Simple rules. I put a bullet in every other slot. 3 bullets total. The twist, you fire twice at yourself. You might think you won't survive the first pull, but you spin the cylinder after the first shot. Resets the odds. Get it? Chances of surviving are low, but that's why it's sudden death. That's impossible, Benny said. Lucky opened the cylinder and did exactly as he said. Shut up. I'll be nice. You and Ethan can do rock, paper, scissors to see who goes first. As Lucky put the Magnum back on the table, Ethan grabbed it. Lucky stepped back, hand on his own gun. Ethan examined the weapon, took a deep breath, put it to his temple, and pulled. Click. He exhaled. Deep breath. Spin. He aimed again. Click. Back to the table. Lucky bastard, Mark said. He's unreal, David added. Lucky took a few steps back. The chat went wild, donations pouring in. Ethan relaxed, back to his usual posture. Lucky had to practically yell at Benny to do the same. Benny didn't make it past the first bullet. He blew his brains out, making Ethan the winner of his 4th round. I just seen something impossible. We're saved. 1 round left, and Block B would win. Or so I thought. One of the masked men came in and whispered to Lucky after they took Benny's body. You've got to be kidding, Lucky said. He grabbed the mic. Folks, change of plans. The last Block A contestant was an old guy, and he just had a heart attack. So, no more Block A. Mark leaned forward. We won, right? Lucky held up a hand. Hold on, Block B, don't jump to conclusions. We can't end it like this. There has to be a 6th match. We'll just take the next runner-up from Block B. Mark's mouth dropped open. That's not fair. I yelled. David coughed again, blood trickling down his lip. Like I said, can't be reasoned with. The masked men came for Mark. As soon as Mark was free, he lunged at the closest masked man, throwing a right hook. The others barely reacted before he landed a left on another. One of the bigger guys tackled Mark around the waist, slamming him against the wall. But Mark managed to hammer his fists into the guy's back before flipping him onto the ground and continuing the assault. Another guard put him in a chokehold, only to have a chunk of flesh ripped from his forearm. They dragged him out of the room, leaving fiery skid marks on the floor. Minutes later, Mark was in the arena, facing Ethan. He was surrounded by masked men with drawn weapons. After a few minutes, when Mark seemed calm enough, they left. Lucky, keeping his hand on his holster, kept his distance. Well, we've got a fighter tonight. Thanks for making things interesting. Mark, catching his breath and wiping blood from his lip, retorted, Oh, now things are interesting? Because watching your rig matches was getting boring? What the heck are you talking about? Lucky asked. Mark pointed at the laptop. Think about it, chat. This whole thing's fixed. I don't know how, but it is. The bullets are rigged. It's all for show. This Ethan guy's in on it too. How else do you explain him beating those odds? That's garbage, Lucky snapped. Maybe Ethan's just destined to win. Maybe none of you sinners deserve to live more than him. Mark scoffed. Listen to yourself. What does that make Ethan? Some kind of messiah? Like a narcissistic jerk like you could believe that? Put your money where your mouth is. Swap the Magnum on the table with the one you're carrying. Same gun, right? At least then I have a chance. Lucky stared at the chat box for a moment. Fine. Round 6, Ethan versus Mark. I shivered looking at Ethan. His blank stare had turned into a wide grin. He looked at Mark, raised an eyebrow, and gestured for him to go first. No way, look at him, he's smiling. He knows he's going to win. He always knew, Mark said. No excuses, Lucky said. I swapped the guns, remember? You think I'd be dumb enough to carry a faulty one? Screw you, Mark shouted. Ethan, Mr. It's all in the cards jerk. I know your tricks. I don't believe you're just meant to live. I'm Mark Fisher. Hardworking, went to church every week since I could walk. Too much beer and a few fights are my only sins. God's on my side. I'm not pulling. You'll have to kill me yourselves. Because you haven't seen the cards, Ethan said. He snatched the gun, spun the cylinder, put it in his mouth, and pulled the trigger 5 times in rapid succession. Click. 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 Back to the table. He fired 5 empty chambers and just sat there smiling. I wish I could have seen Lucky's face through that mask. He was shaking, frozen. The donations exploded. The chat was a blur of text. I don't blame them. What Ethan just did was mathematically impossible. He redefined luck. It was déjà vu. I blinked, and a spark returned to Mark's eyes. I swear, for a second, we locked eyes through the glass. I nodded. Do it, man, David muttered. Mark grabbed the gun and aimed it outward. Lucky reacted instantly, reaching for his own gun. He drew, but Mark already had him in his sights. Bang! Lucky's mask flew off, and he collapsed. Men burst into the arena, firing at Mark until he fell in a pool of blood. He didn't stand a chance, but he did it. That monster was dead. It was a small victory. I was breathless. Is it over? Who knows? I hope Mark's sacrifice wasn't for nothing, David said. The remaining men dragged the bodies out and huddled by the laptop. They shook their heads and gestured towards the chat. One of them picked up the mic. I crossed my fingers. Some crazy stuff just happened. We've got more donations and viewers than ever. We've made a ton of money. Thanks to this Ethan guy. Ending it now would be dumb. So, with our leader gone, we're changing the rules. The last one standing goes home. Sorry, this wasn't the plan, but hey. People want to see how far this guy's luck goes. You can call me Leroy. I'm running things for the next half hour. David laughed, a broken, wheezing sound. These people. I'm so sorry, kid. I wish I could trade places with you. Even after all this, I was still going to be forced to play along so they could squeeze more out of this sick event. They kept their guns on me while they untied me. When I stood, my knees buckled, and I fell. They kicked me and dragged me into the arena, leaving a trail of tears and probably pee behind me. The chair was warm. I sat across from Ethan. His grin was wider now. The star of his own twisted show. Let's go. Decide who goes first, Leroy said. Round 7, Ethan versus me. Every breath I took tasted of iron and sweat, making me gag. I shifted in the chair, my arms and back sticking to the crimson stains. My ears rang, a lingering echo of the gunshots. Chunks of something, probably brain matter, lay splattered across the table between me and Ethan. Seeing his white smile above that mess sent shivers down my spine. Tears stung my eyes. My mind raced. Jesse. Mom. Dad. All of them. My funeral. Mom's sobs, Dad's clenched jaw. How alone my little brother would be. I was lost in my thoughts for a minute or two. Then something snapped. No, this is garbage. Oi, cocky jerk. He's acting like he's hot stuff over something he can't control. It had to be rigged, like Mark said. What were the odds of what Ethan had done? They were practically zero. But did it even matter? Leroy, whoever he was, wasn't alone. For armed men stood in each corner of the room. If anyone tried another stunt like Mark, they'd be riddled with bullets in seconds. And what if Ethan wasn't cheating? Maybe the old Lucky was right. Some guardian angel, some crazy idea of good karma paying off. If he was cheating, I was dead. If he wasn't, I was probably still dead. There was no heroic sacrifice I could make. It's been 2 minutes, chat. And neither of them are doing anything. Has Ethan lost his nerve? Is our other contestant too shocked? Maybe we need to spice things up. Rock, paper, scissors? Coin flip? Or how about... No, I interrupted, my voice hoarse. I'll go first. Ethan's grin widened. He didn't say a word. Leroy chuckled. All right then. Pick it up. My hand trembled as I reached for the magnum. It felt heavy, cold. I looked at Ethan. He just stared back, that unsettling smile never leaving his face. I could almost hear him saying, "It's all on the cards." I closed my eyes for a second, took a deep breath, and put the gun to my temple. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could feel the cold metal against my skin. I pulled the trigger. Click. I let out a shaky breath, my legs suddenly weak. I spun the cylinder, the metallic click echoing in the sudden silence. I brought the gun back up, my hand shaking even more than before. I pulled the trigger again. Click. I lowered the gun, my whole body trembling. I looked at Ethan. He was still smiling. It was like he was enjoying this. Your turn, I croaked. Ethan reached for the gun, his movements slow and deliberate. He spun the cylinder, put the gun to his head, and pulled. Click. He spun it again. Pulled again. Click. He put the gun back on the table, still smiling. What the heck is going on? Leroy said, sounding genuinely confused. This is getting boring. Do something. I picked up the gun again. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. I spun the cylinder, the sound deafening in the silence. I put the gun to my head, closed my eyes, and pulled. Click. I spun again. Pulled again. Click. Back to Ethan. He went through the same routine. 2 clicks. No bullet. This went on for what felt like an eternity. Click after click. Spin after spin. Each click was a small victory, but it also brought me closer to the inevitable. Ethan never flinched, never changed his expression. He was a stone-cold statue with a creepy smile. Leroy was losing his patience. The chat was probably going crazy. I could almost hear the virtual shouts and demands for blood. All right, that's enough, Leroy finally said. New rule. We're going to speed this up. Each of you gets 1 pull. No spinning. Just 1 shot. Whoever gets the bullet first loses. He picked up the gun, opened the cylinder, and I saw him slip a single bullet into one of the chambers. He spun it with a flick of his wrist. He put the gun back on the table. You go first, he said, looking at me. My stomach dropped. 1 bullet. 1 chance. No more spinning. This was it. I stared at the gun on the table. It seemed to pulse with a dark energy. I could almost feel the weight of that single bullet, waiting to end it all. I looked at Ethan. He was still smiling, but there was something different in his eyes now. A flicker of anticipation? Triumph? I couldn't tell. I took a shaky breath and reached for the gun. My fingers wrapped around the cold metal. It felt heavier than ever before. I lifted it slowly, my arm trembling. I could feel the eyes of Leroy and his guards on me, the invisible gaze of the chat. I put the barrel to my temple. The cold metal pressed against my skin. I closed my eyes. Images flashed through my mind, Jesse, younger and laughing, Mom's warm embrace, Dad's proud smile. All the things I was about to lose. I took another deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. This was it. There was no more avoiding it. No more hoping for a click. This was the end. I pulled the trigger. Click. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me dizzy. I lowered the gun, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I looked at Ethan. His smile hadn't faltered. Your turn, I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan reached for the gun with the same slow, deliberate movements as before. He picked it up, spun the cylinder once, and put the barrel to his head. He didn't hesitate. He didn't close his eyes. He just pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. Leroy swore loudly. What the? I couldn't believe it. 2 clicks in a row. With only 1 bullet. It was statistically impossible. It was like the universe itself was mocking us. All right, that's it. Leroy yelled, snatching the gun from Ethan's hand. This is ridiculous. I'm not dealing with this anymore. He opened the cylinder again, checked it, then slammed it shut. He spun it violently. New rule, he announced, his voice tight with frustration. I'm going to point the gun at one of you. I'll pull the trigger. No more turns. No more clicks. One of you is dying right now. He looked at me, then at Ethan, his eyes darting back and forth. The tension in the room was suffocating. I could feel the sweat trickling down my face. He raised the gun, his hand shaking slightly. He pointed it at me. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. There was no more escaping it. No more hoping. This was the end. I braced myself, closed my eyes, and waited for the bang. But it never came. Instead, I heard a different sound. A sharp, metallic clang. I opened my eyes. Leroy was staring at the gun in his hand, his face pale. The gun had fallen apart. The cylinder had somehow detached from the frame, landing on the table with a loud thud. What the? He stammered, picking up the broken pieces. He examined them closely, turning them over in his hands. This is impossible. The guards in the corners of the room looked just as confused as he was. They lowered their weapons, exchanging bewildered glances. In the sudden silence, I heard a faint sound. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. It's all in the cards. I looked at Ethan. He was no longer smiling. His expression was blank, almost serene. He stood up slowly, turned, and walked towards the open door of the arena. No one stopped him. Leroy and the guards just stared after him, their faces etched with confusion and disbelief. Ethan walked out. Just like that. No fanfare, no dramatic music, no congratulations. He just walked out of the arena, leaving Leroy and the guards in stunned silence. I sat there, still trembling, the broken gun pieces scattered on the table. I looked at Leroy. He was staring at the doorway Ethan had disappeared through, his face a mask of disbelief. He looked like he'd just seen a ghost. The guards were whispering to each other, their eyes wide. They kept glancing at the broken gun, then back at the door. No one moved. The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the cameras and the distant murmur of the chat, which I could no longer see, but could almost feel its presence. Finally, Leroy shook his head, as if trying to clear his thoughts. He turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion and resignation. I don't understand, he mumbled. That's not supposed to happen. He looked at the broken gun again, then at me. Just go, he said, his voice flat. Get out of here. I didn't need to be told twice. I stood up, my legs still shaky, and stumbled towards the door. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see Leroy's face, or the guards, or the empty chair where Ethan had sat. I walked through the corridors, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I didn't see anyone. It was like the whole place had been deserted. I found my way back to the room where we had been held. It was empty. The restraints lay on the floor where we had left them. I walked out of the building into the cool night air. the city lights seemed brighter than I remembered. I took a deep breath, the fresh air filling my lungs. I was free. But the feeling wasn't one of joy or even relief. It was something else. Something unsettling. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's smile, the sound of his whispered words, "It's all in the cards." I didn't understand what had happened in that arena. I didn't understand how Ethan had survived. Was it luck? Was it cheating? Was it something else entirely? I'll never know. I walked home that night, the events of the past few hours replaying in my mind. I thought about Mark, about David, about all the others who hadn't made it. I thought about Ethan, the man who had defied all odds, the man who had walked away unscathed. I still have nightmares about that night. I still hear the clicks of the gun, the whispers in the silence. And I still see Ethan's smile. I've tried to put it behind me, to move on with my life. But I can't forget. I can't shake the feeling that I witnessed something impossible, something that defied all logic and reason. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I find myself whispering those same words, "It's all in the cards." Whether you mourn the death of the shopping mall or celebrate it, there is no denying that the institution has had its 15 minutes. No longer the practical hub of community and commerce it once was, it has been relegated to its current status as an urban wasteland. I suppose you've got the internet to blame, or thank, for this turn of events. Why make the journey to an increasingly dirty cluster of buildings when one click will bring you anything you could ever need? When, rather than shoulder past crowds of pot-smoking teens and blustery, arguing couples, you can do all your window shopping from the comfort of the computer screen? Alas, the shopping mall is dead, but believe me, we're better off for it. I didn't always think that way, of course. There was a time not too long ago when I was saddened to see the old buildings going out of business. During my first few years out of high school, I watched a series of shopping malls get shuttered for good. Last ago was Vista Loma Shopping Complex, where I had spent many a weekend with my friends as a teenager. I remember those days well. The mall was in a state of decline even then, but still maintained an ecosystem of those regulars who saw a mall visit as an occasion, not just an errand. Me? I used to drag my groups of friends around to Hot Topic, or to catch a movie after wolfing down a greasy slice. Sometimes we walked around aimless, no destination in mind, just to escape the overbearing eyes of our parents. While other kids our age spent their free time at parties, experimenting with drugs, and with each other, we preferred to. Well, we were the weird kids. We went to Star Wars reruns and Magic, the Gathering card drops at Vista Loma's game store. We may not have been going crazy, but we had fun with it. Looking back, I don't regret the way we spent our youth. It was what it was. Some of those friends have stuck with me to this day. Others. Thing is, life has a way of moving on. We grew up and never knew we were growing up. With time, the very concept of the shopping mall fell deeper and deeper into obscurity, and though we didn't know it, we were the last generation who truly got to enjoy its magic. Filthy and dingy as that magic may have been. Vista Loma Shopping Complex, that hallowed hall of our teenage exploits, was still open, but just barely. I was 23 years old and fresh out of college, looking to find a job, perhaps to move away from home at long last, when I heard that it was struggling to stay open. That it would likely be shutting its doors for good, and soon. I called Jen, the only one of my friends who still lived in town, and with whom I had whiled away many a weekend at Vista Loma. When I told her I was thinking of paying the place one last visit to say goodbye, I wasn't sure she'd want to come with. Looking back, I wish she hadn't. "Pick me up at 2, she asked. "I've got some errands to run later, and I'd rather be at home before nightfall." "But you're right, it would be fun. Let's take a grand tour of the place, one last time." And so it went. I picked her up at 2 and we made the drive out through the suburbs, near where the edge of town met the shrubby edge of the desert. Only a 20-minute drive, but that day it felt longer. Our first indication that the mall had changed was the parking lot, barren but for a line of cars near the entrance. The sign outside was broken. It read, 6TALMASHPING Simplex. Apparently it wasn't worth replacing the missing letters. Jen and I parked along the edge and hastened to the entrance, which spoke a further portent of doom. Brittle palm leaves lined the sidewalk outside the entryway, and the glass doors were smeared with grime. Months, perhaps years, of graffiti streaked the edges of the door and the surrounding walls. One message scrawled across the glass caught my eye. "Next stop the Twilight Zone." Cute, I thought, at the time, for the feeling that we crossed over into someplace else was already strong, uncanny, even, and I was charmed at the idea of some local teenagers watching old television programs. Still, whoever had written it must have felt the same pit in the stomach that I was feeling now if they'd been prompted to scribble that across the door. But if the outside of the mall felt bad, the inside was even worse. The entire lower level had been closed. All of its lights had been shut down, and the staircases and escalators leading down had been cordoned off. The second story, where we had entered, was dimly lit. Most of the light fell from the skylights above, and settled diffusely through a thick gloom. Though you could see to the end of the hall, the lights in the distance grew dimmer, and nary a soul trod the floor. It was totally deserted. We stood there in the stifling air, eyebrows raised at each other, wondering what had happened to the shopping mall we had once loved so well. "It's like a ghost town," I mumbled. Jen grinned, nodding. "Yeah. Spooky, right?" She cupped both hands around her mouth and called out, "Hey. Anybody up there?" I winced. Her voice rang against the walls and echoed back around us. There was no response. "Maybe we don't do that," I suggested. "Oh, come on, Charlotte. Don't be a spoilsport. No one's even here." I looked out across the gloomy second story. In between the walkways, over the railings and past balconies, you could lean out and look down upon the first floor. It was pitch dark below. Once upon a time, some architect had factored greenery and plant life into the mall's design. Huge trees rose from their fenced-off sections, growing under the slanted rays through the skylights, and stretched their limbs up above the second story. Back then, they might have brought some much-needed character to the complex. Vivacious, green, they would have amplified the sense of life inside. Now they stood like very tall, still, lonely headstones, and, looming from the dark shadows of the first floor, their thin trunks reminded me of an image I'd seen in a children's book, once the necks of sea serpents, rising from the fog above a black and stormy sea. "I don't know what I thought I'd find," I said, slowly, "but it wasn't this. This gives me the creeps. It is pretty weird, isn't it? So empty, so dim. But don't you remember how much fun we used to have here? back when it was full? I remembered, but looking up past the weak lights, past shuttered storefronts and empty benches, vending machines half full and directories scratched to hell, I couldn't imagine anybody having fun here. I was feeling more upset than nostalgic, more disturbed than wistful. The two of us were not shoppers here, we were interlopers. Still, we made an attempt to have fun, and toured the place to see what was still open. What we found surprised us. The old game store, where we used to buy comics and magic cards, was still open, and surprisingly well stocked, but vacant, save for a dead-eyed employee. There was a store that only sold knives and replicas of movie weaponry. How was that one of the only stores that managed to stay in business? There was a jewelry store, but neither of us needed to buy jewelry, especially not from a second-rate shopping mall selection, and finally, there was a used toy store. Neither of us had seen the strange toy store before, but Jen wanted to go in. She had been struck by a memory of her youth that she needed to satisfy, a memory that I most certainly did not share, and did not feel a need to indulge at the moment. "Remember when we used to play hacky sack?" Jen asked. No. "I remember when you used to play hacky sack. For like a month. It was longer than that. I was really good, you know." I didn't contest that. She hadn't been great, but she'd been better at it than I ever had, or ever would be. Admittedly, hacky sack had never been an interest of mine worth pursuing. She had always been far more involved in athletics and outdoor pastimes than I had. I'd been stuck in books and video games throughout my teenage years. It was only our shared interest in science fiction that had brought us together in the first place, and had prevented her from totally meshing with the cool crowd, athletic or not. A nerd is a nerd is a nerd. "I'm going to find a hacky sack in there," she announced. "Just you wait and see." I threw up my hands. "You don't need an excuse to go into the toy store," I said. "I'll come with you, hacky sack or no hacky sack. And when I find it, I'm gonna buy it." "Never said you couldn't, Jen." It was a cluttered store, comprised of tight, winding aisles, maze-like and crammed with all manner of toys, some fairly new, some seemingly ancient. I was still puzzling over the oddity of a used toy store inside of a failing shopping mall, when I tripped hard. I landed on my knee and gasped with the sharp, sudden pain, but by the time I had realized what had happened, I was mostly just thankful I hadn't knocked a shelf over. I caught my breath. As I stood up, I thought I saw the heel of a shoe vanish around a corner. It would be the first non-employee I'd seen, and so, cautiously, I peeked around the shelf to see who else might be in Vista Loma with us. No one was there. Ignoring it as a trick of the weird light, I pressed deeper into the store. Jen had vanished somewhere into the network of shelves, leaving me alone to thread my way through, but I felt uncomfortable now. I struggled through a web of unease that had left its sticky threads upon me. The shelves stretched up above me to the ceiling. The floor gave way beneath me. The woman Charlotte had disappeared. I was Theseus, mired in the labyrinth. And did the Minotaur lurk these twisted aisles? Suddenly, I dreaded to continue through the store, no matter how childish it seemed. But I caught sight of Jen, then, hastily searching the shelves, and my heart eased a little. Then I completed a loop of the store, and caught sight of an old balding man seated behind his desk, crammed against the wall. Toys framed him overhead, from below, and on every side. When he saw me come into view, his face went tight and gray. "Who goes there?" he called. This was unexpected. "Who goes there?" Was that something people actually said? And why now, from this man, who was clearly the clerk of the store? I was flustered. I'm sorry, I was only looking around. My friend's in here, too, you see. His demeanor changed completely. Heaving a sigh of relief, I watched his face relax, and he shook his head. No, I'm the one who's sorry. Please, forgive an old man his frights. I get a mite jumpy is all, sitting here alone all day. Don't get many customers, you know. He smiled, his teeth very white, the corners around his eyes crinkling. My mind plays tricks on me too, in this lonely building. I swear, sometimes, I think I'm seeing things. Maybe I was already on edge. Okay, I was definitely already on edge, but hearing that unnerved me even more. Seeing things? I asked, knitting my brows together. What kind of things? But he'd clammed up. Never mind me, never mind at all. My imagination gets ahead of itself, sometimes. Don't it just? Now, can I help you find anything? Jen popped around the corner of the store with her fabled treasure in hand. Hacky sack, she exclaimed, proudly displaying the footbag. We just came here for this, I told the clerk. This old thing? He took the toy from Jen's hand, gave it a once-over, then passed it back. I'm supposed to charge you $2 for that, but I don't think $2 is going to make too much of a difference around here. Do you? Go on, keep it. Gesture of goodwill. Jen just beamed and said, thanks. But while she bounded out of the room, I still hadn't been completely satisfied. What was all that about? I asked, highly suspicious, and still wondering why he'd been so nervous. The old man gave me a conspiratorial look and leaned towards me, over his desk. I was forced to draw in close to hear his hushed tone. Don't y'all linger now, he said. This place. It ain't such a good place anymore. Best to leave, and quick. I paused, because I was halfway certain the man was crazy, and halfway convinced he was telling the truth. What does that mean? Listen, you seen anyone else in this place? Aside from employees? That's right. Aside from them. And no. I guess not. Well, if you do, you just walk on by. You hear me? Ignore 'em. Your business ain't their business, I can tell you that much. And if someone tries to speak to you, that is, asks you for the time, or directions, something like that, you don't even turn and look. You keep walking, straight for the exit. Which you ought to be headed towards, even now. What on earth are you talking about? Never mind me. Just an overly cautious old man, it seems. Or maybe I'm losing my mind. He smiled again. Or maybe I know something you don't. I work here, after all. I've seen what goes on in this place. And trust me, y'all best be on your way. Right, well. Thanks again, I guess. You remember what I told you. Don't even look. This conversation was creeping me out more than anything else that had happened since arriving. I was determined to leave it all behind. In fact, I thought I'd take his advice and get out of Vista Loma sooner rather than later. Outside the store, I found Jen vainly attempting to kick the footbag around in the air. Check me out, she said, swinging a kick and nearly sending the thing over the balcony. Still got it. I'm bored, I lied. I would not admit to being frightened, and that I was bored wasn't entirely a lie either. Let's get out of here. Already? We've seen all there is to see. Place is empty, and all the good stores are shut down. Besides, you said you had errands to run tonight. All right, she shrugged and bent to retrieve the fallen footbag. Let's go, then. There was one place we hadn't seen yet, the food court. But it happened to be just beside us as we made the loop towards the entrance. A sea of empty seats, dozens upon dozens of empty seats, vacant, gleaming, gray, sat eerily still under the violent white glow of the lights overhead. The ceiling was lower here than in the main passage, and the darkness between lights more palpable. Most of the restaurants were closed, and those that were open looked unstaffed. I guessed that there was rarely anyone here to bother feeding. As we walked past the derelict rows of empty tables and chairs, I paused. For there, beyond the light, seated in shadow, was a lone man. From the distance we stood I could not see his face. Only darkness and the outline of his body. He was wearing a coat and a hat, and his hands were stuck in his pockets. The ends of his shoes and the brim of his hat jutted from the dark, but the rest of him was swallowed by the black. Whoever it was looking right at us. Come on, I urged Jen. Time to go. We hurried back down the passage, but the way to the entrance seemed somehow longer than before. The dim light felt weaker, too, and the shadows from the unlit level below us almost seemed to be rising. Boarded-up doors and windows leered like prison cells on either side. As the food court vanished behind us, Jen made me slow down. I had almost been running. We took a more leisurely pace, but I made sure we kept moving. Then something caught my attention, and I stilled. Do you feel something? I asked, peering at the branches of the trees that shot up from the level below. Something? Do I feel something? I dunno, Char. Something like what? Like a breeze? She paused and gauged the air, even testing it with a licked finger, making a dramatic show of the gesture. Then she shook her head. You're losing it, girl. How often do you hear of a breeze indoors? I don't know. I'm just cold, I guess. But from where I stood, I could see that the foliage was wavering, slowly, leaves and branches bending like creaking fingers, and the shadows around the trunks were drifting like waves. I tried not to think about it. We pressed on and reached the entrance once more. Same grimy glass, same message scrawled across the front, though from this side it read OZTHTRTX. Something had changed, however. Someone had locked the door. A heavy chain and padlock had been strung through the handles. That's weird, Jen said, too calmly. Why would someone lock up during business hours? Panic had latched its claws into me, though I tried not to show it. But why? What reason did I have to panic? The inside of the mall was empty. The clerk had said some strange things, and one of the doors had been locked. That was all that had happened. Inside, there were other employees, so there would still be a way out and people to help, if need be. We both had cell phones, and could phone in a worst-case scenario. Outside, I could see the cars in the lot, the sun overhead. The world was fine, the world was normal, and any minute now, I'd be back in it, away from this uncanny place. It struck me that there were perhaps too many cars in the lot. Certainly more cars than there had been employees. So, where was everybody? Let's find another exit, I said. If I remember correctly, there's one close by. As we turned, I caught sight of someone walking past us. Just a glimpse in the corner of my eye, mind you. I couldn't even be sure I'd seen anyone. But as we began to walk, I heard a voice too close in my ear. It was stiff and dispassionate, totally devoid of emotion. I was one step away from believing that it wasn't even human. And though it asked a question of me, there was no question mark on the end. Flat, toneless, it called into my ear. "Excuse me, miss," it said, sending chills down my spine. "Do you have the time?" Jen, for whatever reason, couldn't hear the voice. I remembered what the clerk had said about not responding to anyone, about not even looking, and though I felt like I was potentially being terribly rude to a flesh and blood person, I had just about lost my nerve. Besides, the toneless voice had me convinced now that whatever the clerk had been alluding to was real. Ignoring my now pounding heart, my body entirely on edge, I ignored what I'd heard and kept walking, but the curiously dispassionate voice trailed me past the next several storefronts and tried again. "Mississippi, excuse me, Mississippi. Do you have the time? Do you?" Eventually, the voice vanished. It stopped in an instant, as if someone had been there, and then simply hadn't. Despite my dread, despite my every frazzled nerve screaming at me, I willed myself to turn. And saw no one. "Did you hear that?" I asked Jen, but she just turned, puzzled. "Hear what?" Never mind. The exit was ahead of us. This one, thank the Lord, was still unlocked. The outside world was only a few steps away. "You're acting really strange today, Char," Jen said. "Gotta say, I'm not a fan." "Oh, look. The exit's open. Wait here a second, okay? I'll be right back." Fear seized me. She was going to leave me here? Alone? A little too earnestly, I blurted, "Where are you going?" She pointed to the restroom doors beside the exit and said, "It's like 20 minutes home. More if there's traffic. I've had a lot of coffee today, and I don't want to hold it all the way back." "Geez, you're jumpy. Do you need to come, too?" "And no," I said, determined to keep my cool. "I'm sorry. I've been feeling stressed lately, I guess. I'll wait here for you." The last thing I wanted to do was wait here, without her, but Jen had already noticed how scared I was getting. Clearly starting to bother her that I was freaking out so much. I would prove I wasn't that much of a coward. At last, I added, "Just be quick, okay?" She shrugged. "Suit yourself." Jen ducked into the restroom and I leaned against the wall, fighting to lower my heart rate, to make my breathing even and normal. I cast my gaze down the empty shopping mall causeway, to the dim halls between shuttered stores, and saw, to my sudden fear, a face peeking around a corner. The features were indistinguishable from this distance, but I could see that the face was wearing a hat. The same figure from the food court. It rounded the corner abruptly, and though it was far away, it was quite clearly heading directly towards me. "Oh, hell no," I whispered, then slipped into the bathroom where Jen had just flushed and was stepping out of the stall. "We have to go," I said, snatching her wrist. "Now." Jesus, Char, what's going on? Someone's following us, I don't know who, but I'm not sticking around to find out. Let's go. I haven't even washed my hands. Christ. Her eyes flashed, suddenly wary. Her voice dropped. Someone's following us? You better not be screwing with me. Despite her protests, I pulled her out of the restroom. The mall was empty. The figure I'd seen had disappeared. We were, as before, totally alone. There's no one here. God, you freak me out, okay? Just calm down. I'm going to go wash my hands, and then we can leave. Is that all right? Do I need your permission? I was going to be hearing about this for a while. Meekly, I nodded, and Jen slipped back in to wash up. She was only gone a minute, but I felt the dim light quicken around me, pulsing, and a clatter rang out in the distance. Finally, when I thought I couldn't bear it any longer, Jen reappeared. All right, fraidy cat, she huffed. All clean. Now, let's go. We hastened outdoors, blessed relief, and walked along the sidewalk towards the lot where we parked. Halfway there, though, Jen stopped again, swearing under her breath. Ugh, don't hate me, Charlotte. I think I left my phone on the restroom counter. I have to go back and get it. I dreaded the thought of going back in. She could tell. Look, since you're clearly having a moment, I'll go back by myself. I'll be fine, okay? You go get the car and pull it around to the exit. I'll only be a minute or two. She broke away to go back in before I could stop her. Part of me knew I shouldn't let her go alone, but I didn't want to set another foot inside Vistaloma as long as I could avoid it. So I did what she said. I went to the car and pulled it around, and then I waited. And waited. And waited. God, Jen, now isn't the time, I mumbled, pulling out my phone to dial her. No answer. I sighed. Surely, I was overreacting. About everything. What I'd seen had just been another person inside, one of the people who had their cars parked out front. And that person who'd asked for the time? Just some passerby with an odd voice. I'd been rude as hell to them, too. Yeah, the mall was creepy inside, but that was just because it was nearly shut down. Because it was so empty, so vacant. There was nothing strange going on here. Except, that didn't explain why Jen hadn't come back. I told myself she was talking to someone, or using the restroom again, or anything. Anything but the horror stories to which my mind was prone to drifting. 5 more minutes, and no Jen. It was time to face my fears and drag her back out myself. Stealing my nerve, I locked my car and headed back towards the door. When I stepped inside, I groaned, for it was immediately apparent that something had happened. Something bad. Jen was nowhere to be seen. Neither in the restroom, nor visible down the main causeway. But the stairs leading down to the lower level, the stairs that had been barricaded against entry, now stood totally open. And on the top step, I saw one of Jen's shoes. Don't get me wrong, I love Jen. I really do, and I was horrified at the prospect of something bad having happened to her. But I waited on that top step for far longer than I would care to admit before I worked up the courage to follow her down. If she were really in trouble, Was there truly anything I could do to help her? Could I live with myself if I didn't try? Though it had been hot inside Vista Loma, stifling even, I was wrapped in chill as I descended the stairs. Shadows sprang at me from all around, and their touch against my skin felt like soft fingertips. Deeper and deeper I went, less secure with every step. If the second story had been the twilight zone, this was the abyssal. My foot finally rang out on the tiled lower level, and I took stock of the benthic gloom. My analogy was incomplete, though, however empty the ocean depths might seem, the lowest levels are actually teeming with life. Horrifying, twisted, blind life, but life all the same. This level of the mall was, comparatively, stark and lifeless. Or was it? Try as I might, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. I turned on my phone's flashlight to help me see, but the light only extended so far. Otherwise, the darkness was too thick. I could feel it parting before me, like a physical barrier, like I was constantly pushing to move forwards. On the ground, I encountered another of Jen's shoes, and knew I was headed the right way. I knew, no matter how scared I was of what might be in this place, I needed to call out for her, but if Jen were able to hear me, who else would hear my call? Screwing my eyes shut and summoning all my courage, I called out. Jean! The noise bounced all around the shopping mall and came back to my ears, distorted, alone. In the darkness to my right, I heard the sudden sharp rapport of footsteps heading my direction. Nope, 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 I thought, and lunged forward into the dark. There was an open doorway in the distance, through which I could see light. The footsteps were rapidly gaining on me, and so I began to run. Whatever was behind me was running now, too. Then, as before, I heard a dispassionate voice, only it sounded warped, broken, as if it were issuing from a speaker underwater. This time, it spoke in a voice far deeper than human range. Excuse me, miss. Do you have the time? I sprinted into the open doorway and slammed the door behind me, cutting short the low and motionless voice. This hallway was empty and brightly lit. Only now I was trapped in a hallway on the lower level, with no apparent way out. And I still didn't have Jen. Oh God, Charlotte, what have you gotten yourself into? Think. Yet I was incapable of thinking. I paused to catch my breath, then decided my best course of action was to follow the hallway. Maybe I'd find some way out. Maybe I'd find Jen. Anything but opening that door and facing whatever was on the other side. One foot in front of the other, I reminded myself. That's it. One foot in front of the other. I don't know how long I walked. I know that I went down another staircase. And another. I must now be deep beneath the mall. I hadn't even known there was a network like this beneath the place. The hallway seemed twisted up, and I kept rounding corners, with a heart-stopping hitch of breath each time, I might add, without looping back on myself. If I had been counting the number of turns I'd made, I was sure it would have been impossible. Yet onward I went. Remembering what had happened the last time I had called out, I hesitated to do so again. But I was making no progress. I felt hopelessly lost. And I hadn't seen anything else in here. Perhaps whatever was lurking in this place was only out beyond the door I'd slammed. Perhaps I was safe in these halls. Relatively speaking, that is. So, finally, tentatively, I tried one more time, a little softer now. Jen. This time, I heard a faint cry in response. It sounded definitively human. Not emotionless, not warped, but distant. I ran towards the sound, and bolstered by my success, cried out again. Jen. Char. That was definitely her. God, what was going on? Why was she down here? What was this place? Then I heard a little louder, Char. Help me. Oh my God, help. I kept running and kept calling her name. She kept responding each time, getting louder and louder as I grew closer to her, but growing increasingly terrified. I passed countless doors, some closed, some ajar. I never bothered peeking inside, for I could hear that I was still a ways to go. Then I heard a bone-chilling series of screams, and Jen's cries for help grew impassioned. To this day, I am unable to sleep, constantly wondering what Jen was seeing, what she was feeling that could produce such a hideous noise. I had not known human vocal cords were even capable of making such a sound. Frenzied, I sprinted madly around the next corner and came face to face with the man. His face was tilted down, his features obscured by the shadow of his hat brim. His arms hung limp at his sides, and his feet didn't quite touch the floor. Without looking up, he spoke, and I heard the same toneless, warped voice as before. "Excuse me, miss. Do you have the time?" I shrieked and bolted past the floating figure, straight towards the nearest door. On impulse, I threw it open, ran through, kept running. My feet flew independent of my body. I spared no thought for what might be behind me, for the floating man with the broken voice, for the twisted passages beneath Vistaloma, not even for Jen, whose voice I could no longer hear crying out. I kept running, eyes closed, and tripped, ignoring the searing pain as I badly skinned both my knees and elbows. There was warm blood on my arms, running down my shins, but I was unconscious of my hurt. Panting, sobbing, scared witless, I finally opened my eyes. The moon shone down on me. In the distance, a coyote howled. I was outside. Vistaloma shopping complex was several hundred feet in the distance. What? I mumbled, tears still streaming down my cheeks. I took a haltering step towards the complex. How did I? It took me several minutes to work up the courage to approach the building, but when I did, all the doors were closed, locked with heavy chains. I tried peering in through the glass, but the inside was totally empty. The benches and vending machines were gone. Every last store was shuttered, and all the lights had been shut off, forever. It was a building condemned. I still don't know what happened to Jen. I haven't been able to explain what I saw either. Before now, I've never even talked about that day. I'd prefer to think of it as a nightmare. That such a place might be real is something I'd rather not believe. For weeks I woke up to the sound of a passionless voice, like a broken record, warbling in the other room, asking for the time. I kept all my lights on, always, and whenever I saw someone walking in my peripheral vision, I jumped for fear of my life. I was a wreck for months, and though I am a little better now, only a little, mind you, I still sometimes wake to the sound of that broken voice. I still have visions in my sleep of a man in a hat, floating off the ground, or of inexplicable footsteps chasing me. The mere thought of setting foot in a shopping mall or any public forum really now fills me with dread. I rejoice the decline of in-person shopping. And Jen? It's easier to think that she's just missing. That's the official story, Anyways, I'd rather not consider the alternative. It's been nearly 5 years since the incident, and I'm finally starting to move on. If I'm a little nervous still, it's just a shock. It'll wear off in time. I hope. I'm finally moving away from this town, and though I'm sad to say goodbye to parts of it, I can never be grateful enough to leave that God-forsaken building behind. What did we ever see in it? How could it ever have been fun? No matter where I go, I'm haunted by the fact that Vista Loma still stands. Condemned, closed down, but undemolished. Inside, shadows still thrive, strange noises still echo down the empty halls, and beneath it all, twisted passages still run their murky course, stalked by God knows what. If you ever find yourself near that place, take my advice, and steer clear. There's nothing for you in there, no more discounts, no more shopping, no more community. The only deal you're likely to make is that of your life, and even then, only if you're quick. Only if you don't tarry. And if by some strange twist of fate you should find yourself in the lower level, then things are less clear. The world may never know the outcome of those who wander down below. After all, there's no telling what happens in the dark.